Here's a move. This is a good one. Check this one out.
Man, these guys need to just make out already.
Master, I have fouled on the living room carpet.
Huh?
I have gone doo-doo, Master. I repeat.
Oh, well, why didn't you just say so? Oh, I see it. Oh, girl, that is nasty. Well, only one way to deal with something this rancid. It's morphin' time. Tyrannosaurus! Huh. Back to action. So as y'all might have gathered there, I'm kind of fond of Power Rangers. Now, I don't think the franchise is perfect, as I definitely say it's done damage to the perception of tokusatsu in the West. I mean, how many times do you see a fight scene or costume people deem as cheap, and they just say, looks like Power Rangers? The thing is, though, that Power Rangers can actually be really good with the right amount of time and effort put into it. SPD, for example, shamelessly reuses suits from across the franchise, but I'd argue it still looks better than most of the modern seasons. In Space and RPM had the show on its last legs, but they also look really good. Some of this is helped by the natural grit that comes from not being filmed in HD, which I think is more of an asset than most people realize. But it's also because those seasons are written in a way that don't talk down to its audience, while the more modern ones did, even though Hasbro in particular should have known better by now. This issue, and the damage to Toku's reputation in the West, is because of one simple factor. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, I actually love MMPR, don't get me wrong, but it is holding the franchise back so much that it's not even funny. Well, slight correction, the way it's perceived is holding the franchise back. Something I didn't get into in my overly long Sonic Mania video was how that game actually ruined Sonic 3 and Knuckles for me by just doing what that game did but worse, rather than making something that feels worthy of being a Sonic 3 successor. It just copies it without considering that maybe it's not the perfect way to go. This is opposite to another game I've played, Super Metroid. Sure, it's clunky and somewhat dated, but I can still appreciate it nowadays because every title that came afterwards, even until today, didn't just copy Super Metroid. To truly respect something old is to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you don't honor the past, just taint it. But that's not a discussion for this video. Rather, it's just set up for another issue. Most people do not understand Power Rangers in the slightest, including some people who have actually worked on the franchise. Am I the only one noticing a trend of late of these Power Ranger redesigns to add unnecessary texturing and panels to the costume? Of the Boom Comics frequently making designs that just clash against the pre-established Zoo Ranger aesthetics? Of Cosmic Fury adding dumb padding to the costumes, even though they'd objectively look better if they were more Sentai-like? It seems like a lot of people in the West want Power Rangers to be like the MCU or whatever. And I have a simple message for those people. You are the problem. Power Rangers is a tokusatsu. It is an adaptation of Super Sentai, which is also a tokusatsu. If your Power Rangers designs do not look like they could exist in a tokusatsu, then you are not only missing the point, but adding to this misconception that tokusatsu is somehow inferior to our Western heroes, when in reality it's just a stylized way of doing things. Tokusatsu literally means special filming after all. Sentai suits in particular are beautiful in their simplicity, in how they portray musculature without drawing emphasis to it. They portray spandex not as silly, but as freaking awesome. The monsters look like a guy in a suit, but that's the fun of it. You know how many of the cheaper effects were accomplished, but that look behind the scenes makes you appreciate it more. Some dude in a robot suit endured actual explosions for your entertainment. How do you not love that? And Power Rangers, and other adaptations like it, have equal validity in my opinion. They take the material given to them by Sentai, and make something unique and different from it using that material. A good example of what I mean is when MMPR had the Green and White Rangers fight. It's a cheap fest of very static, original footage in the park. Mixes of footage across the 2 Sentai seasons, and whatever the heck these rat costumes are. But you know what? There's genuine heart beneath all that cheap. The creators came together and made it happen because they knew it was a cool idea. Heck, even if I step outside of the regular Toku spheres for a second, I think most people would watch The Green Goblin's Last Stand, a fan film made on $500 in the 90s, over 2023's Spider-Man Lotus. Because while one has a lot more budget, the other has a lot more heart behind it. Seriously, why did you use CGI for him just sitting here in the rain? You could have just used a green screen here. In conclusion, next time you see a fight scene or costume that looks cheap, don't say, "This looks like Power Rangers." Instead, say, "This looks cheap and uninspired." Because those two ideas are not mutually exclusive. So why do I bring all this up? Well, because it bleeds into the central but flawed premise of today's film, Power Rangers 2017. Produced by Lionsgate, Power Rangers is a reboot of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. A reboot while the original show and its universe was still going strong. I mean, it's happened before, and I've even enjoyed some such works, but it's always weird when it does happen. And on the surface, this should be a no-brainer to do. New incarnation of the franchise meant to bring non-fans into it. Kinda like when they make a new Batman or Superman movie. But it rubs me the wrong way for Power Rangers specifically, because both it and Sentai are already built to be moving forward, constantly reinventing itself to appeal to new audiences. Reunion specials happen, yes, but they aren't the entire point of the franchise. If Saban felt that the current incarnations of Power Rangers weren't bringing in new fans to the franchise, then logically speaking, the show is broken and needs to be fixed. But if the point of this movie is to bring in people who wouldn't check out the show, and who likely won't get into it afterwards, then from a franchise standpoint, this movie has no audience. Basically, the entire premise of this reboot movie is dumb, so for the sake of fairness, we'll just ignore that for the rest of the video. Anyway, to prevent myself from getting deadlocked in the setup for a review again, let's just get into it. We begin our film long ago, and yes, I am using screenshots to reduce the risk of copyright claims. Shut up. Where a young Zordon, a Red Ranger in this incarnation, is crawling through the mud, and for some reason, everybody gets naked when they demorph. This doesn't happen later in the movie, so it's kinda weird. Anyway, he's gathered up the coins of his other Rangers and was clearly the final mission of his team. With his final breaths, he asks the coins to choose those who are worthy, and tells Alpha to summon a meteor to come crash land on top of them, in order to stop their treacherous Sixth Ranger from obtaining the planet's Zeo Crystal. More on that later. He succeeds, sending their Green Ranger into the oceans below, and presumably saving the Zeo Crystal while he snores? We cut to many years later, where some high school students have kidnapped a bull as part of a senior prank against a rival school.
Him. You just milked him.
This is a hit.
Was it one udder?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not an udder, dude.
I was gonna say it was actually kind of weird. It was really big, and I had to use 2 hands.
Stop. We will never discuss this again.
That'd be great.
You know, there's a difference between helping your friend jack off a bowl and, you know. So, yeah, sexual abuse towards an animal. Great way to start off your film that's meant to sell really bad toys. Yeah, we'll get to that later, too. Anyway, the cops get called, and we get the shot in a truck that just... Look, I'm not one to get motion sickness, but just look at it. It's making me queasy watching it here. Imagine how bad this was in theaters. Thankfully, however, he crashes his truck, and hey, that's our title card. Think that would have been better after the earlier flashback with the actual Power Rangers, but whatever. We cut to 3 weeks later, where our truck driver and future Red Ranger has a shiny new ankle bracelet, and is having to attend school on Saturdays just to graduate. He also can't play football, so his dad is pissed at him. Or at least, that's the info actually communicated here, but again, we'll get to that a bit later. In the school, we have a bit that, once again, we're going to have to wait to discuss, and we meet our future Pink and Blue Rangers, Kimberly Hart and Billy Cranston. The latter of whom is getting quite familiar with, Skulk?
Sorry. I've had to watch you play these for weeks. Are you crazy?
No?
What if you had an extra one? Why don't you cut this select. Why don't you stop me, huh?
Man, some reboots just aren't as good as the original. Anyway, Jason defends Billy from Skulk, and Kimberly gets called to the bathroom to talk with some girls she knows. They mention how Kimberly sent a picture of one of them to a dude named Ty Fleming, whose tooth Kimberly apparently punched out. They put it back. And then they decide to cut her out. Literally, they say. As this one girl cuts Kimberly out of a picture they have without even looking at it. When I originally watched this movie, I laughed for a solid 3 minutes at this action. Seeing the consequences of her actions on the wall, Kimberly decides to cut her hair with the scissors because she doesn't want to look like them? That's the most I could get out of the novelization that I'll discuss more at the point I keep on hitting at. But yeah, it doesn't really make sense with what her arc is supposed to be in this movie. And according to like a page later, this act apparently gets Jason to start feeling somewhat horny for her. After their detention wraps up, Billy asks Jason if they could hang out that night, since he needs help getting somewhere. But Jason points out his newest accessory. Billy mentions that he knows a way around that, and that Jason can have access to a car for a few hours, so Jason considers it. Cut to Jason at home, where his dad is still just pissed at him, and now I have to explain something that the film doesn't, even though it really should have. You see, as part of my process for reviewing this movie, I decided to acquire the film's novelization. Normally movies like this will have a standard and junior novelization, but this film just got some sort of weird hybrid between the two, and man does it suck. Formatting is terrible, there are typos here and there, and above all else, it just feels cheap. I actually do remember getting junior novels back in the day. I was kind of an avid reader, and they'd have like actually decent formatting and pictures from the movie, stuff like that. This is as bare bones as possible, but it features a lot of details from deleted scenes and earlier drafts. One of those details is when Jason hurt his knee. When I initially watched the film, I presumed it had happened before the film's events, and stuff like the cow prank was a result of him lashing out, now that his dad didn't have his precious football star of a son. This bit about him now being a disappointment comes up a lot, but it's very non-specific. I presumed he had done it at some point in the somewhat distant past, because that's the typical arc these types of movies follow. However, this contrasted greatly with him defending Billy earlier and saying he didn't like guys like that Skulk dude, or him just trying to be a decent dude earlier. Heck, as we see later, this film's answer to teenagers being realistic is everybody is a jerk. So that assumption about him having two natures that clash seemed especially valid. However, the novelization clears up on pages 10 and 11 that his little car accident did this. His injury came as a result of a mostly innocent prank, on his part anyway. Which means him being kind to Billy earlier makes a lot more sense. He's just a kid who got caught up in a simple mistake, and he has to rebuild his entire life from that. So why didn't the film have a shot after his accident of him looking down at his knee to indicate an injury? No idea! Why didn't they have his father mention, "You busted your knee doing a stupid prank"? No idea! Why did they cut a later line that specifically mentioned this around the end of the film? Well, that was apparently a deliberate cut, but I don't know why they made that cut. So yeah, I guess this one shot of his knee while on his bed was supposed to clue us in one way, and do a ton of heavy lifting, but just didn't? Good job writing that character arc, fellas! I had to read supplementary material to get basic info! And on that subject, the film makes a big deal about how everybody looks at him in shame or disgust or whatever, but the only one that actively does that in this film is his father. Everyone else seems fairly chill with him besides the dude that mooed at him earlier. Though that could be because the only other reaction we get is... he's not even getting any jail time. I think his affliction is pretty livable, all things considered. Anyway, after hearing his dad doing more complaining, Jason decides to ride his bike over to Billy's house. And after some shenanigans, Billy tricks the sim on Jason's ankle monitor so it thinks he's at home, effectively writing out this particular plot thread because I guess they just didn't feel like dealing with it anymore. Hang on tight, knee brace, you're going the same way. They take the van to where Billy's deceased father once worked, and Jason helps unload some gear Billy needs, and we get this scene.
We don't know each other at all. I don't know what we're doing here.
I gotta tell you something, okay? I'm on the spectrum.
Well, is that like a workout program?
No, it's a diagnosis. See, that's the thing. I didn't get the joke. My brain doesn't work the same as yours does, you know? Yeah.
Yes, the 2017 Billy Cranston is the first Power Ranger to be openly on the autism spectrum. And comparing with the original, yeah, I can see that. I can at least give the movie that this is pretty decent representation, and his actor really does sell a good performance here without seeming insulting. It's good stuff. Just a shame that it's in this movie. We then meet this film's version of Zack as he creeps on this film's version of Trini while she does some martial arts on the rocks. Because what else are you gonna do in a small town, I guess? Meanwhile, Jason also decides to be a creep and spy on Kimberly while she swims. Though at the very least they do start up an actual conversation, basically about, man, doesn't this town suck? And we are totally relatable teenagers, what with how we talk about life sucking all the time, and barely showing anyone the most basic of courtesies, until Billy decides to channel Bruce Couch and blow some stuff up in a quarry, bringing our 5 future Rangers together to bicker and be total jerkwads to each other.
Okay.
Hey! You guys looking to get busted or something? This place is a restricted area.
Oh, really? Einstein restricted? As in, we shouldn't be standing on crazy rocks doing Karate Kid moves, right?
Yeah, or camping out on old trains. I see you too, homeboy.
Again, why does this film's version of realistic people just boil down to everybody has a chip on their shoulders and hates everyone else? Did the writers need some Tylenol while working on this script? Or maybe some executives forced it on them in an incredible Freudian slip, I don't know. Regardless of everyone else's sour attitudes, Billy's explosion causes a landslide that reveals some sort of glass wall underneath, where the teenagers find what they call a power coin later in the movie, even though they look more like crystals or jewels, which Zack then chips out. More on this later. And at this point, with all the we'll get back to this later parts, you might be wondering why I'm doing a recap review instead of just talking about the film in general. Well, this is for a few reasons, actually. Reason number 1, I am desperately hoping you guys haven't seen this film, so you might need the gist of things. But reason number 2 is for the people who actually have seen this movie. So much of the info just kind of slides over your brain that you might need a reminder what actually happens in this thing. In either case, I feel that the info hits the hardest if you get it mostly chronologically. So that's reason number 3. Maximum psychic damage. Anyway, causing a massive explosion like that obviously attracted my insecurity. So after a car chase that would work perfectly fine in any other movie, the teens decide to play chicken with a train in order to get away. They die horrifically, movie over. No, they live, but for now, we cut to a fishing boat in the middle of a storm, who have just caught... well, I guess Supreme Leader Snoke has seen worse days. By the way, let's go back to the book for a second. I've already mentioned how it was kind of cheap in quality, but the way I got it used was also quite despicable. I had food crumbs and a sticker in there that wasn't really advertised, and someone wrote in pencil over this scene in particular. For some reason, they underlined the nets fouling, despite that seeming to be a fishing term. And then they underlined the part about the fish gleaming in the spotlights of the boat, and something heavy being in there, and then finally, this part. Inside the boat's hold, there seemed to be some kind of frozen body. A faint green glow appeared. Then its eyes burst open. And that's underlined with a note saying, "What the? Wow!" Glad someone's having fun here at least. So basically, good job on quality control, Diaz! You really knocked it out of the park here. Truly, you earned the HelloFresh sponsorship you include with this thing. 2 days later, the teens awaken to find themselves superpowered. Jason no longer needs his knee brace, not that it makes much of a difference since he wasn't exactly limping anyway. They're all super strong, and they have the power rocks that won't leave their side. Don't know why none of their parents question them sleeping for an entire day in their ripped up clothing, especially since one of them has a mother that is medically dependent on them, but whatever, it gets them to school the next day. At school, Jason and Kimberly discuss how weird this all is, while Billy gets some popularity because he accidentally took down Skulk earlier. And yes, I know that guy has a name, I just find it funnier to call him Skulk. The three decide, after some incidents, to go back to the mine. Meanwhile, back at the fishing boat, the police are now investigating the body that was found. Did it take the boat 2 days to get back? Because it seems to be simultaneous with the stuff at the school. We also see the van getting towed as the kids pass by later. Does Angel Grove just really not believe in working on Sundays? Whatever, the body kills the cop, and we get back to the part that we actually care about. The three meet back up with Zack and Trini at the mine, where I guess all the security from earlier went away. Maybe they trade out Sunday for Monday, I don't know. The teens find a chasm, and being stupid teenagers with superpowers, they all decide to jump, with only Billy hesitating.
What we tell you, Billy, you got it.
Told you. See? Woo! Yes!
Billy, right? Yeah.
Thankfully, that fall didn't kill Billy, but rather led to him discovering a weird body of water where the teens glow the same color as their ranger colors. They soon dive deep enough that they're able to surface at the bottom, which is an admittedly cool idea for an entrance to a secret lair, though there are some practicality problems with this setup. Anyway, on the other side of this false wall of water is the spaceship that crash landed earlier in the film. Wait, alien spaceship, stuck in a rock formation of some kind, with robots that can transform, it crash landed in dinosaur times, and the ancient battle they were in the middle of gets resurrected in the then modern age. Was that an intentional homage? I mean, the same guy who scored this movie did do the music for the best Transformers cartoon, and his score there was a lot more memorable, to be honest. Jason's coin glows, again showing that's more of a crystal than a coin. Seriously, I am not dropping this. And the door opens up, allowing the teens to enter the ship, where they're attacked by Alpha 5, who is probably supposed to be funny, but I don't recall him being anything more than annoying. He talks about how he was waiting for the teens, and brings them to a room where he tells them to stand around in a circle by this space-looking thing, which leads to the partial resurrection of Zordon in the form of one of those pinboard things you stick your face into. Seriously, even the novelization, obviously written by just a script, describes it just like that. By the way, Zordon in this movie is played by Bryan Cranston, who you may know more from Breaking Bad and Malcolm in the Middle. But he also did some monster voices for MMPR back in the day. Heck, overall, I can say that the cast in this movie is pretty good for what they were going for. What they were going for, however, sucks, so let's get back to it. So anyway, Alpha steals Zordon's consciousness into the ship's computer before he died earlier in the movie. Why he didn't do this for any of the other past Rangers is never explained. And after he accepts that the teens need to be the Power Rangers, we get an explanation for what's going on, starting with explaining the Zeo Crystal. In this universe, the Zeo Crystal is a sort of light of life, and every planet that has life has a piece of the crystal inside of it. 65 million years ago, Zordon's team of Rangers were betrayed by their Green Ranger, named Rita Repulsa. Again, I'll make a note on this later. And died defending the Zeo Crystal from her. However, now she's back through... they never explain why she's back, but I'll speculate on that in a moment. And the teens have to become Power Rangers to kill Rita before she can gather enough gold to create a creature named Goldar, who will dig up the crystal, which will allow her to create and destroy worlds. Can we just start comparing the lore to the original? I feel like it'll hurt a lot less. Alright, let's start with the Zeo Crystal. In the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the Zeo Crystal was a powerful crystal that, long ago, was hidden in the Caves of Deception beneath what would eventually become Rita's palace on the moon. In Season 3, the Rangers had to make a move to retrieve it before Master Vile, Rita's father, could try to claim it. Tommy and Catherine managed to retrieve it, in a moment that I really enjoyed from a character perspective, and while Master Vile did briefly claim it later, the Rangers pulled through and split the crystal into 5 segments that they then scattered through time. However, when the Rangers were turned into children during a later scheme, and their ninja coins were destroyed, they had to travel through time on various spirit quests to retrieve the 5 segments of the crystal, eventually leading to them using the crystal segments to restore Earth's proper timeline, and then become the Power Ranger Zeo in order to battle the Machine Empire. Now, with that in mind, let's ask the following questions. 1. There are only 5 segments of the Zeo Crystal in the original continuity, and every planet that has life in this universe has a piece of the crystal buried inside of it. Are you meaning to imply that there are only 5 planets in the universe with life in them? 2. I'm guessing we were supposed to get the Zeo Power Rangers later in this failed franchise, so does that mean that the Rangers will need to steal the crystal segments from each planet in order to morph? That sounds pretty villainous to me. And 3. Why? Why are you complicating the incredibly straightforward story of MMPR like this? In the original, everything flowed incredibly naturally. Rita was imprisoned on the moon, where it's logical for her to have been able to stay out of reach for most people, until some unaware astronauts accidentally freed her and her goons. So Zordon and Alpha called on a team of carefully selected teens that they'd obviously been monitoring for a while to become Power Rangers and stop her from trying to cause pain and destruction. It was simple, concise, and over in 22 minutes. It worked! But here, a bunch of dumb teenagers blow up a rock wall, find some crystals that they call coins, despite not all resembling coinage, and I guess that's what somehow caused Rita to rise from the bottom of the ocean after 65 million years? How did nobody ever find her before then? People were fishing in that area. Are we meant to infer that the teenagers caused her to be found by finding the coins? Did they create the problem that's gonna destroy Earth? Because that seems like a detail the movie would mention if so. Heck, it would even make for a decent motivation for this set of screw-ups, to try and make something of themselves for the sake of the world they put in danger. But no! Best the movie explains, these two events are otherwise unconnected, and it's the world's biggest coincidence. And don't say it's the will of the Morphin Grid, because that's not how the Morphin Grid works. Yes, it gathers those who are best suited to fight against a particular threat, and some threats are inevitable, and may even be created by the actions of a protagonist. But in this case, the threat would literally not be a threat if they just hadn't found the coins. If I'm connecting the dots right, this entire movie's plot was a mistake. Yet, you know what? I'm going with that narrative. Chalk this whole affair up to a massive whoopsie. And while we're at this comparing to the original thing, let's finally address the teens, shall we? Now, while I will admit to very much liking MMPR, I'm not blind to the fact that it's not exactly a writing powerhouse. It comes together way better than most people would admit, but other seasons do character work way better. However, I will argue that the first episode is really good at getting things set up in a quick and concise manner. After Rita gets out of her dumpster prison, we have a scene where we sit down and meet the teens before they become Rangers, and most information is established visually rather than needing to be told to you. Jason and Zack are doing some light sparring, showing them as skilled fighters but not jocks. Kimberly is doing gymnastics, presenting her as somewhat more feminine but still physically capable, and Trini is doing martial arts, showing her as being a bit more cool and level-headed in her approach to life. We see instantly why these guys would be at least physically able to handle the powers, but it's quickly added onto by the dialogue where, for one thing, they all talk as friends. And then we meet Billy, an obvious nerd, but who the group doesn't treat any more poorly, despite him needing a karate class. Teams that clash and bicker at first can be entertaining in the media, don't get me wrong, but one of the great things about MMPR is the fact that everybody respects each other, and just tries to help each other out. And that's what really bothers me about the reboot teams. Certain traits are kept from the original team, like Trini knowing martial arts, Jason being a fairly natural and responsible leader, Zack being a cool guy, and Billy having a great degree of intelligence and natural aptitude with the technology in the command center. But everybody save for Billy more or less hates each other. Individual relationships do form slowly, and they are at least trying to come together, but they're given this hurdle that the original team never had to deal with. Mostly to stretch out the runtime. I'm sorry, but I honestly can't stand this team of Rangers, even as their own thing. They are, in a word, assholes, with only two characters I even vaguely care about. I don't want to see them overcome their struggles. I want to turn off the TV and stop thinking about them. Brand loyalty is the only reason I'm still here, and we're only at about the 50-minute mark. But we've gotten as far as we can without getting further into the movie, so we need to keep going. The teens are hesitant to do the Power Rangers thing at first, a bit that is technically crossed over from the original, but it feels more like an accidental thing they got right. That actually happens a few times in this movie, so we're going to be putting asterisks on screen when I don't think it's intentional. But Zordon shows them all a vision of Rita farting so hard that she kills everyone in Angel Grove. So after some discussion, they decide to at least try and do the Power Ranger thing. All they have to do is morph within 11 days. Oh, well, that part should be easy. Most teams do that in like 5 minutes. They are not able to morph for several days. Why does this universe insist on sucking so hard? Before they come back to train, though, we do get some scenes of the Rangers' home life. Establishing Zack's sick mother that I mentioned before, Jason's dad getting his truck back so they can fix it, Rita murdering people for gold on the side, and showcasing Trini's oddly pushy mother.
Pee in that cup!
Why was that scene in the trailer? And why is an obvious drug reference present in the novelization for children? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and spoil a later scene here. The reason Trini's family situation is the way it is because they apparently care a lot about how they come off to other people, in labels and being normal and whatnot. And Trini is a closeted lesbian, the first confirmed non-straight ranger in the franchise. So yeah, she's not only dealing with being the new kid all the time, 3 schools in 3 years, but she's got all that lurking under the surface. And since I have no other point to talk about this, I'm going to take this opportunity to bring up the sequel comic, Power Rangers Aftershock. It's really weird, taking place after the movie despite coming out on the same day, and clearly trying to set up some kind of ongoing comic in this universe. With human-born monsters made out of Goldar dust, and the government being like, hey, we exist, and we'll take you down. But the biggest thing is the Rangers being written slightly out of character. I don't know, it's like I read this dialogue and I just don't really see the people from the movie. I see what could actually be a decent team of Rangers if they were an original thing. Anyway, it features this weird line from Trini. In my family, if you care about someone, you question and annoy, and people hate you for it, but they're better off in the end. Is this meant to imply that Trini came out to her parents after this? She is seen hanging out with her brothers at the end, but there's no indication of other improvements to her family life. Were we meant to infer something, or did the comic writer just get a weird script? Anyway, the teens begin their training, and Zordon recites the 3 main rules for being a Power Ranger. Never use your powers for personal gain, don't escalate a fight unless the enemy forces you to, and don't reveal your identity. I mention it because it comes up later. Because they can't morph because of stupid reasons, Zordon decides to train them without their armor, and creates simulations of Rita's foot soldiers, who are still called putties despite being made out of concrete and rock. Does this movie just not know what words mean? Like, I imagine there's some dude out there saying I only hate this movie because it changes things from the original. And hopefully you're not stupid enough to be that guy. But here we have an opportunity where changing what they're called would really be logical. But they're oddly bound to the original names? Like, you know how some seasons will arbitrarily change the species of certain Zords and weapons from the Sentai, even though it's clearly not what said thing was supposed to resemble? This movie has that for some reason, but it's all original footage. Whatever, we enter a montage of the teens training with the holograms, then doing real life stuff, then failing the morph, and Billy starts to track down the Zeo Crystal, eventually nailing it down to Krispy Kreme! And they said Man of Steel had obvious product placement. So to try and give them some motivation, Alpha shows the teens their Zords, based on dinosaurs because, 65 million years ago. And Zack manages to take his for a somewhat uncontrolled joyride while completely unmorphed. Most of the final battle is going to be fought in the Zords anyway, so why are they not dedicating resources to letting them pilot the Zords more effectively unmorphed? The teens are more than willing to fight evil together, and are showcasing more friendly relationships with each other after the initial rough edges. So even if they aren't the perfect dream team the Morphin Grid is demanding they be for no reason, this could be a viable backup plan. Especially given a certain detail about the Megazord I'm holding off on right now. Anyway, after he nearly kills a band of nuns, one of the few actually funny moments in this movie, everyone else gets mad at him for pulling this crap, and thus start a fist fight, which Billy tries to stop, leading to him somehow being able to briefly morph. And now we get to the biggest question of this movie, at least from a script point of view. Why can't they morph yet? And yes, I know the in-universe reason for it. The Morphin Grid wants them to take off their masks and be open with each other. Presumably, Zordon and his team were like that by the film's logic. So then, how did Rita betray them? Throughout this movie, she is not portrayed as a fallen hero or actually vindicated. Her backstory is that she grew power-hungry, killed her friends, and tried to take over the universe with the Zeo Crystal. And she did so while being perfectly able to morph. Are you seriously telling me she was completely open and honest with her teammates while plotting their inevitable murder? Did none of the other Rangers on Zordon's team notice that Rita was going a little cuckoo and maybe start to not trust her? The movie itself even has her later note that she was an outsider on Zordon's team, implying that she and the other Rangers didn't completely trust each other in the first place. Did nobody ever think of this stuff when writing the script? Because I noticed it the first time around. But let's stop pretending that this is actually a hard rule. What some people seem to forget is that a script written by a real-life person does not require such rules. If the scriptwriter wanted, they could have thrown this idea in the trash where it belongs and done one slight rewrite. The Rangers can morph, but they still need training before they can take on Rita. Heck, maybe Zordon even deliberately withholds their armor from them because they're not ready yet. You know what that would change? Basically nothing. This rule is nothing but a contrivance to make these characters earn what the original characters had from the start. It's a common trope that everybody is tired of with these adaptations. Because not only does it signal cowardice on the part of the creators, and a lack of confidence in what they're adapting, but it can also have the unintended implication that your version is inferior. Which, I mean, in this case is accurate, but still. Just put them in the costumes and get it over with! Moving on. Zordon gets pissy that everyone else can't morph yet, and kicks them out. While the other teens decide to set up a camp and hang out for the night, Jason walks in on Alpha and Zordon talking about how, if the Rangers manage to tap into the morphing grid, then Zordon can use it to come back to life. Which is a concept that has precedence in the main canon thanks to RPM, but it worked a bit differently. Also, I doubt these scriptwriters have seen RPM. Naturally, Jason feels lied to, and insulted about how Zordon views his team. And they have an argument. And just to throw the film another bone, I do like Zordon's character here as a concept for a Ranger mentor. I don't like it being Zordon in particular, but an ex-Ranger unable to fight anymore, having to stand back and lead the newest generation, while also being rather imperfect himself? That's a decent concept that a full series could really develop. So anyway, after a brief scene where Rita goes nuts on a jewelry store, Jason joins the other teams in what is supposed to be a bonding scene, where they open up to each other, you know? Zack goes first.
I live in the Melody Mobile Home Park. It's just me and my mom. And my mom is the best! And my mom, she's sick. I do what I can, but I'm scared. Sometimes I get too scared to stay there at night because I'm afraid she can't make it. And if she goes, when she goes, I got nobody else.
So you leave your sick and dying mother, who doesn't seem to have the greatest grasp of the English language, alone at night, with no way to contact you, because of what will happen to you after she dies. And this fact is supposed to make me like you. Jason and Kimberly choose to skip for now, and Trini gives her confession I spoiled earlier, and Billy assures her that she's with them now, but she wonders what that really means.
Are you Power Rangers or are you friends?
You're a bunch of jerks I'm stuck with for the remaining hour of this movie. Can we please move on? We cut to later at Trini's house, where while she's sleeping, Rita shows up at her house... flying somehow? I don't know, maybe Zordon's team discovered jetting. So yeah, this scene is just a generic blah blah blah, I'm evil and going to kill you. But it does bring into question something the movie isn't addressing. How does Rita know English? Or that people frequently call Trini Dee Dee in this movie. Now, in most seasons of Power Rangers, English is just kind of the default language across the universe. But at the beginning of this movie, Zordon and Rita spoke in an alien tongue. And Zordon first spoke in that language when Alpha revived him. And they explained him speaking English for the rest of the movie by saying that Alpha had cataloged English into the matrix of the ship. Rita doesn't have access to that as far as I can tell. She just wakes up and starts speaking English right out of the fishnet. And later we see her being familiar with the concept of cars and school classes. Did someone tell her what a car is before she killed him? And I figured maybe it was her power coin telling her about the mistake with Trini's name. So I figured I'd get the novelization to confirm that. Like, maybe it was a detail that slipped through the cracks of scripting, but nope. The novelization is a fairly straightforward adaptation of what you see on screen here. So I checked the boring commentary on this DVD.
I love this moment because it feels like in the silence that something really dangerous is about to happen.
Nothing there either. So my attempt at going above and beyond for this review has yielded an incredibly barren harvest. I'm tempted to just burn this thing for comedic effect. We then got to Kimberly breaking into Jason's house and waking him up in the creepiest way possible. Basically, she wants to finally tell him what she couldn't tell everyone else at the campfire. The reason she was in detention. Basically, she punched Ty Fleming because he told her that she was the meanest person he'd ever met. Because she shared what is implied to be a nude of one of the girls we saw earlier to him. And it then got spread across the school. And yeah, she claims to feel bad about it, and I even believed her in my first viewing. But then I actually analyzed her behavior, how this film portrays her victims, and how a bit of that boring commentary talks about it. and now I don't believe her. Now, her wanting to hide and not face the police about when it happened, I get that. It was a very sudden and overwhelming thing if it happened as she tells it. Especially since, technically speaking, if it is a nude, Kimberly Hart, the Pink Power Ranger, just distributed child pornography. And believe it or not, minors can be forced to register as sex offenders if they do that, even if it's their own nude. But I'm gonna give the film a slight pass on this because it's only implied, and no other source really reveals what the picture actually is. It could just as easily be the girl doing drugs or something. Though, if it is a nude, I question the principal showing her father the picture. However, once she has the tension over punching Ty Fleming, she immediately tries to reconcile with said friends to go back to her old life. But her victim decides that no, she does not forgive Kimberly, and said victim's friend supports her in this decision. And while yes, there are situations where people do just need to get over themselves and forgive those who have wronged them, a massive violation of privacy, a literal crime on top of it, is a situation where forgiveness is entirely at the discretion of the victim. Heck, it's not even like they completely destroy her life after this. They outright tell her she can come to cheer practice if she wants to, though they'd obviously prefer if she didn't. Her social life can climb out of this hole just without them as her friends. She can live with the consequences of her actions, grow and change as a person.
Then live with it. Just be the person you want to be.
But the film seems to be on the side of her as a victim here. Not only are the girls portrayed as stuck-up and obnoxious for wanting to cut her out of their lives, but they continue to be so throughout the film, and get indirect consequences from it, like in the cafeteria scene.
Nice hair.
Or later during the final battle.
That's what you get.
And in the novelization, which likely took its cue from the script, the reason she cuts her hair isn't because of her being ashamed of what she did. It's because she's ashamed that she ever thought being part of that friend group meant anything. And then there's what the commentary said about it.
Kimberly, for me, and I know you and I talked about it a ton, was that, you know, initially I just wanted her to have cyberbullied this girl. As simple as that.
Right.
But it was hard. I mean, to ask a character who really is a straight-up cyberbully, for us to buy her as one of the original Power Rangers, and Saban was like, guys, that's really hardcore. So we had to kind of soften it and pull back a little bit and have it be that she didn't take the picture, but she got the picture and she redistributed it.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but who took the pic does not really matter to me in situations like this. What matters is who shared it across the entire school for everyone to see. And while I am angry here, I do want to take a moment to note this. I am not mad at actress Naomi Watts for the actions of her character. I know that should be, fairly obvious, but actors and actresses are frequently dogpiled for playing a character that fans do not like. It's important to remember that their job is to act out the material, not write it. And they have agents that help them get these parts. So with all well wishes to Naomi Watts, I can confidently say that her character, the 2017 Kimberly Hart, in terms of in-universe actions, is the worst Power Ranger in the history of the franchise. She violated the privacy of a friend, possibly committing a sexual offense in the process, got off scot-free in the eyes of the law, pretended to be sorry about it, and when she was rightfully shunned for what she did, if the perspective of the film matches up with her perspective as much as I think it does, she views herself as a victim because she said she was sorry.
Newsflash, Kimberly. You are not the center of everyone's universe.
She's got all the sincerity of that time I bit my brother when we were kids and I claimed it was an accident. And by the way, she never confesses this to anybody but Jason before they morph. So add that to a list of plot holes. So after that cadre of bad implications, Trini texts everyone about what Rita did to her. And they all meet up at the school's football stadium. Basically, Rita's striking at dawn, don't count on getting that deposit back. She also told Trini to meet her at the local shipyard. So after a pep talk, which includes Jason revealing what Zordon wanted to do, they all decide, morphed or unmorphed, to go fight Rita together. And somehow this moment of unity isn't what allows them to morph? Okay. They get a bunch of makeshift weapons like a pack of lunatics and run right into Rita's trap, getting defeated in less than 5 minutes because she's at least partially morphed. She ties them up and demands the location of the Zeo crystal. Somehow she knows Billy figured it out. Again, would have been really nice if they explained that. And he gives it up in exchange for his friends' lives. Out of spite, she drops Billy into the water, and despite the attempts of the others, because for some reason she magically untied them, they can't save him, even though resuscitation is possible for about 4 to 6 minutes afterwards, and he was down there for under a minute. I mean, Rita's magic, that's never explained in this movie, could have weakened him, since you do see a slight effect before he goes down, but that was really fast for drowning. They bring his body back to the ship, hoping Zordon can do something about this. But because story, he can't. And after a little heart-to-heart where they basically state the exact same thing as when they went to fight Rita, the morphing grid finally opens. And while it briefly appears as if Zordon is going to use it to come back, he soon reappears, stating that only one can come back to the morphing grid. Yet more evidence that the scriptwriters never watched RPM. So Billy comes back, and Zordon accepts Jason as the one true Red Ranger. The arbitrary hurdle behind them, it's time.
It's morphin' time.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And finally, after an hour and 30 minutes of this crap, I can finally talk about how awful these suits are. Firstly, let's get one thing out of the way. Outside of power-ups or small pieces on the chest or whatever, armor never works for a Sentai aesthetic. It just looks tacky and difficult to move in and hurts what should be a relatively simple design. So you should avoid it as much as possible. Secondly, you see all this needlessly complex design work all over the place? All this does is make your suit difficult to look at, because I'm trying to discern what exactly I'm supposed to be seeing. Plus, all it does for those toys you're trying to sell is ensure that it's just going to be a barely discernible lump of unpainted plastic. Need I remind you that this movie and its needlessly adult material was made to sell toys. Thirdly, even ignoring how bad of an aesthetic both of the previous points are, barely any of the Zoo Ranger aesthetic is in here. MNPR really stumbled onto what may possibly be some of the most refined suits in all of Sentai, with a very simple triangle pattern to bring all the colors together without being tacky, the very distinct dinosaur shapes on the helmets, and the morpher on the belt as a strong connection to the civilian identities that feels really natural. So what do these suits bring over? A single triangle on the chest, helmets that look more like dragons and insects than dinosaurs, and you see those things on the belly buttons? That's supposed to be the morpher. Yet you wouldn't be able to tell if they hadn't made a toy out of it. But that's supposed to be the morpher. Which is probably why a bunch of them were rioting at my local Ollie's back in 2019, like the rest of the garbage this movie tried to sell. And to give any credit to them, the movie does, for one thing, show them in action during the day. Lots of movies set things at night so they don't have to show that. And despite what appearances may tell you, they did make actual physical suits for this movie, that they then made look like really bad CGI in the final film, but still, they got made. Oh yeah, and one more thing.
That is not spandex! The material is a self-assembling memory!
So anyway, Rita calls in the putties to attack the base while she creates Goldar, and the Rangers get to work fighting them, with Jason getting a sword because of reasons I'll explain later.
Make my monster grow!
He's not growing, he's forming! You're just saying that because the show did! I swear, every time they do these references, it has like the exact opposite effect on me that it's supposed to. I'm not appreciating it because I'm a fan, I'm infuriated by it because it doesn't actually apply to the current context. Could this movie please stop being bad for like 5 minutes? I need to wrap up this review so I can review important stuff like, I don't know, Bionicle 2. Which kind of has a similar premise to this movie, except it's actually, well written. Somehow, while fully morphed, the putties overwhelm the Rangers. The putties overwhelm the Power Rangers. So, in a flagrant disregard of the no escalation rule we established earlier, Zack uses his Zord to destroy the remaining putties. And it's not like the rules have never been bent in a season that establishes them, such as when Tommy revealed his identity to his brother in Zeo. It's just that all this does is continue to demonstrate how this team is inferior to any other team that has come before it. I would unironically trust Mega Force with my life over these bozos. So the Rangers spot that Rita has formed Goldar, and they decide to summon the Ugly Zords to go down the Angel Grove and fight it. And after Alpha says, "Go, go, Power Rangers," we get a shot of the Zords being ridden out to the theme from the 1995 MPR movie. And I finally get to talk about all the weird naming stuff. Because this scene illustrates why it doesn't work. Because they don't actually have the guts to commit to what Power Rangers is. Rita Repulsa, putties, even saying Power Rangers in full, this movie throws them out without acknowledging that they're ridiculous. And I would admire that from a film made when the DCEU was still current. Except this film takes itself basically entirely seriously, with adult themes, which creates a bit of a tonal whiplash with not just the source material, but within itself. And you can take the source material more seriously if you want. The Red Ranger in Go Onger was a chicken, but a few adjustments there created RPM, one of the darkest seasons in the history of the franchise. Not everything needs to be changed, but if you commit to the parts that don't make sense in the context of your universe, it just feels like lip service. Heck, you could have even dove into Sentai for the names. The putties were called golems in Zoo Ranger, which fits the monsters in this film. And the not coins? Dino medals. It could work. But no, they're so desperate for this to have anything to do with MMPR that they have to use those names. And now they're playing the theme, claiming to embrace the ridiculousness of it all. But they don't have the guts to do one little thing.
Guys.
And how does the actual song end? They are too cowardly to let a non-diegetic song say Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in a movie about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I hate this movie so much. And this isn't an issue of timing either. They are making the movie. They can decide the timing. I can't though. And this is how my attempt turned out. Movie magic! People apparently cheered in the theater at this thing, by the way. So the Rangers defend the city with their Zords while a Kanye West song starts playing. Very nice aging on that music choice, by the way. And just look at this screenshot here. It is a giant robot T-Rex against a bunch of dudes made out of concrete. This should be cool! But again, all I can think about is how easily the actual Power Rangers would be dealing with these guys.
Sorry, Bumblebee!
Maybe this is why Hasbro bought the brand a year later, and then completely tanked it. So Jason and Trini try to take on Goldar, but Jason's dad, in his truck, just so happens to get hit by some of the molten gold flying around, and he needs help. So Jason abandons his post and goes to save his father. And you know, this would be a touching scene if his dad, openly figured out that it was his son in there. Since Jason does use his dad's name in this instance, maybe tie up that thread about how he felt Jason was wasting his life after the injury. But no, he just has a random encounter with the Red Ranger that he probably brings up before asking Jason what he was doing during the giant monster attack. And before you point out that part during the ending montage, that could just as easily be him having an obsession with his son's alter ego after Jason became damaged goods in his eyes. Either option seems equally plausible to me. So the Rangers take out Goldar, and Rita has a brief fake death, presumably while the Tyrannosaurus Zord just stands there motionless, before she and Goldar reform and somehow manage to unearth the Zeo Crystal. Man, that hole does not look very deep. Did the contractors building the Krispy Kreme just, never notice that it was down there? The Rangers form up to defend the crystal, But Goldar is just a little bit too much for these weak Zords, and he's eventually able to push them into the hole in what's portrayed as like this big fall, but look at the wide shot. You could maybe fill that hole with the Zords, but it's gonna be kinda snug. So while they defy all manner of physics in there, the Zords begin to reshape themselves in the fire, which I'm guessing was supposed to evoke some imagery from Green with Evil, and I could honestly go on a whole rant on why that instance was better, but we're about to hit a different one. Namely, the Megazord. What were you thinking? Now, I am perfectly aware that any redesign of Daijujin was going to be a difficult task to begin with. Like with the main suits, MMPR really lucked out on some of the best looking mecha Sentai has ever produced. Literally, the only flaws on this thing is the need to use the tiny hands whenever it picks up the sword, and the Triceratops, Mastodon, and Pterodactyl Zords basically just being bricks to complete the main combination. The full combined thing is close to perfect, and only a few Sentai Mech Sense have come close to topping it. So how did we get here? Look at this thing in toy form. It's just a pile of gray mush! And while the original Megazord had a very straightforward and iconic transformation sequence, which could be easily recreated with any version of the toy, I don't think the designers actually knew how this thing came together, cause it's all obscured in fire when it happens, which just contributes to the lack of fanfare around it. A mech combining sequence is essential to the weight of these fights. When they happen, it's usually when all other options have been exhausted, and the only way to win is to go all out. In fighting terms, think of the combination sequence as the wind-up to the main punch. And speaking of the toy, how did that come out? Well, for one thing, it was massively out of scale with Bandai's main Megazord line, possibly to compete with the combining toy that Playmates put out for Voltron Legendary Defender that year. How times change, huh? And the combination was basically just taking every Zord apart and then building the Megazord that way? And even then, it wasn't the most stable. And by the way, the Mastodon and Triceratops having a ton of legs really doesn't help the insect vibe the helmets are giving. Oh yeah, and one more thing before we throw this novelization in the trash. Outside the Krispy Kreme, Rita Repulsa stood astonished by the sight of the Megazord rearing out of the burning pit. How, she wondered, few Power Ranger teams could form a Megazord after years together. Just an extra bit of proof to you that this universe sucks! Okay, I have officially stopped caring, so let's speedrun the ending a bit. Rita merges with Goldar, we have the world's most boring giant robot fight with an embarrassing ADR flub.
Zack, catch us!
Seriously, how did that happen? And how did we go from the fast and dynamic fights with a very good sense of weight and scale, as seen in Zoo Ranger and MMPR, to this slow, plodding, utterly weightless garbage? This thing legit moves like a little kid trying to imitate slow motion.
Kim, Trini, go back on the arms! I've got swords.
How do you know that? So they defeat Goldar, then Rita comes back like, hey, I came for the crystal, so other people are gonna come for it. Despite the fact that it's been 65 million years since she first tried to get it, and nobody came for the very unprotected crystal, and they slap her away in a scene that even the original Power Ranger show would call ridiculous and inconsistent with its tone. And they can breathe in space, mind you, which makes the teens laugh, having saved the town. Oh hey, the original Green and Pink Rangers are there. That means this movie honors the franchise, right? Couldn't have maybe given them a role with some dialogue? No? Okay. Anyway, Jason returns that power sword that randomly morphed to his side because there was apparently a sort of Excalibur plotline cut from the film that was detailed in this Instagram post I found a few years back, which I'm just gonna let you read for a second. Take your time. Okay. If they were cutting this plot, why was this scene left in? And after a montage, we end with the kids in detention, with a post-credits tease for Tommy Oliver, with an explosion indicating that he has the green power coin now. That I guess he somehow got from Rita Repulsa's frozen corpse in the depths of space? So overall, this movie is pretty good. If you watch a completely different movie instead of it. Do I really need to spell out why it sucks? Literally the only thing this movie has going for it is a pretty decent cast, and some bits of cinematography that at least makes some shots look better than the typical MCU film. The designs are awful, the lore is massively downgraded from the original, any and all attempts to be faithful to said original fall flat in their face, and the script. Even if I wasn't so familiar with the source material, I would hate this script. Most of the characters are unlikable. It takes very uncomfortable sides in some instances, and behind the paper-thin plot is a backstory that doesn't even follow its own arbitrary rules. The best advice I could give for this script is to scrap the entire thing and start over from scratch. That is the only way to fix it.
Next time, try writing a better story!
The only reason I can conceive of for this movie having a fan base is if you only half watched it while zonked out of your mind on off-brand Benadryl, cause that would actually be a somewhat entertaining experience. I already didn't like this movie, but actually paying attention to what is happening on screen only revealed more and more deep layers of stupid underneath. It is so boring and tedious and thinks itself to be oh so important, when all it really is generic garbage based on a fan film that was making fun of the concept of doing this to Power Rangers. But since non-fans took it seriously, that's the direction they went. Hey, here's an idea. Don't take a bad parody seriously. If you want to see a dark Power Ranger story, watch RPM. If you want to see somewhat relatable teens in a Power Ranger season, watch Ninja Storm and Dino Thunder. Preferably in that order, both of these seasons are pretty good and have the best team up. In fact, just watch Power Rangers in general. The period of 1993 to 2009 has very few true misses, and even those tend to have some redeeming qualities. 2011 onward is considerably more miss due to executives just wanting MMPR over and over again. But I found the first season of Beast Morphers to be decent, and what I've seen of Dino Charge makes it feel like a Disney season in HD, and that's a compliment coming from me. I also enjoyed the MMPR Once and Always special, but I wouldn't really recommend it unless you enjoy the entire Zordon era, as the appeal is less the actual quality, and more the fact that these actors returned for it. You want to see them in particular again, basically. I'm a bit low on Sentai recommendations, but I've watched all but the last 10 episodes of Kira Major, and that was pretty awesome. Jetman is also on Tubi, along with a bunch of other seasons, and I hear that one's pretty peak. There's also various seasons of Kamen Rider and Ultraman available on Tubi too, if you want to be really cultured. Also, the next Kamen Rider season is actually going to be simulcast in the US, so if you live there, that's a good way to catch it. You also need to sit down and watch Shin Kamen Rider on Amazon Prime, but I hear good things about it. You gotta search it up as Shin Masked Rider though, which, basically just watch anything but this movie. I never want to see this movie again in my life. It is an insult to everything actually good about Power Rangers. In fact, I dare say it's an insult to good taste. I'm normally an advocate of just letting people enjoy things. But if you like this movie, unironically, problems intact, you're the reason your parents got divorced. I'm sorry, it's just the rules. I was originally going to end this review with a big, Megazord fight and everything, like Power Rangers do, but, you know what? It's not worth all that. This movie is trash. Possibly the worst thing that I have ever or will ever review on YouTube. So it needs to go in the trash. Or perhaps a space dumpster? There's our target, K9.
Preparing weapon systems, Master.
On my mark. Fire!
How is it a space dumpster if we just blew it up?
The dust will reach space eventually. Anyone else want some donuts?
Newsflash, Kimberly. You are not the center of everyone's universe.